Translation. A wrong act committed by a servant leads people in general to blame his master, just as a spot of a white leprosy on any part of the body pollutes all of the skin. Purport. A Vaishnava therefore should be fully qualified. As stated in the Bhagavatam, anyone who has become a Vaishnava has developed all the good qualities of the demigods. There are 26 qualifications mentioned in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. A devotee should always see that his Vaishnava qualities increase with the advancement of his Krishna consciousness. A devotee should be blameless because any offense by the devotee is a scar on the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The devotee's duty is to be always conscious in his dealings with others, especially with another devotee of the Lord. Text 6. Anyone in the entire world, even down to the Chandala, who lives by cooking and eating the flesh of the dog, is immediately purified if he takes bath in hearing through the ear the glorification of my name, fame, etc. Now you have realized me without doubt. Therefore, I will not hesitate to lop off my own arm if its conduct is found hostile to you. Purport. Real purification can take place in human society if its members take to Krishna consciousness. And this is clearly stated in all Vedic literature. Anyone who takes to Krishna consciousness in all sincerity, even if he is not very advanced in good behavior, is purified. A devotee can be recruited from any section of human society. Although it is not expected that everyone in all segments of society is well behaved. As stated in this verse and in many places in Bhagavad Gita, even if one is not born in a Brahmin family, or even if he is born in a family of Chandalas, if he simply takes to Krishna consciousness, he is immediately purified. In Bhagavad Gita 9th chapter, verses 30 to 32, it is clearly stated that even though a man is not well behaved, if he simply takes to Krishna consciousness, he is understood to be a saintly person. As long as a person is in this material world, he has two different relationships in his dealings with others. One relationship pertains to the body, and the other pertains to the spirit. As far as bodily affairs or social activities are concerned, although a person is purified on the spiritual platforms, it is sometimes seen that he acts in terms of his bodily relationships. I shall repeat this sentence. It will have something to do with the class that is coming now. As far as bodily affairs or social activities are concerned, although a person is purified on the spiritual platform, it is sometimes seen that he acts in terms of his bodily relationships. So if a devotee born in the family of a Chandala, the lowest caste, is sometimes found engaged in his habitual activities, he is not to be considered a Chandala. In other words, a Vaishnava should not be evaluated in terms of his body. The Shastra states that no one should think the deity in the temple to be made of wood or stone, and no one should think that a person coming from a lower caste family who has taken to Krishna consciousness is still of the same low caste. These attitudes are forbidden because anyone who takes to Krishna consciousness is understood to be fully purified. He is at least engaged in the process of purification, and if he sticks to the principle of Krishna consciousness, he will very soon be fully purified. The conclusion is that if one takes to Krishna consciousness with all seriousness, he is to be understood as already purified, and Krishna is ready to give him protection by all means. The Lord assures herein that he is ready to give protection to his devotee, even if there is need to cut off part of his own body. And again, text 6 translation. Anyone in the entire world, even down to the Chandala, who lives by cooking and eating the flesh of the dog, is immediately purified if he takes bath in hearing through the ear the glorification of my name, fame, etc. Now you have realized me without a doubt, therefore I will not hesitate to lop off my own arm if its conduct is found hostile to you. Om Agyanati Mirandasya Kinanjana Shalakaya Chakshunun Militam Nina Tasmai Shinguravi Namaha Shichitanimano Bishtam Stapadanina Bhutale Swamrupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpade Gopesha Gopika Kantaranada Kantanamostute Rangira Devrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha kalpa tarubhyascha kripa sindhubheva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namah. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasati Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Namo Vishnupada Krishna Prastham Bhutale Shrimate Prahlada Ananda Swami Nityanamine. Namo Vishnupada Krishna Prastham Bhutale Shrimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Nityanamine. Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shanivadi Paschatya Shatarine. So, this is a very interesting topic, and I will get back to it. The topic that Prabhupada addresses in the second purport that I've read, about the habitual activities, the bodily relationships of the devotee is still engaged as of he joins the Krishna consciousness and takes to it. We'll get back to it shortly. Now let me first entertain you a little bit with the anecdote of mine, the experience that I just had very recently. So, speaking of relationships that pertain to the body, speaking of bodily affairs and social activities that Prabhupada mentions, I've been to one just recently. I've been to a wedding since we saw each other last time. Now my wife has a cousin, and she was getting married, and they two grew up together, and naturally they grew up very close to each other. So she selected her to be her, as you would call it in English, maid of honor. She selected my wife to be her maid of honor for a wedding. So like a groom has a best man, right? So what is a best man for a groom? It is called a maid of honor for a bride. So my wife was going in a role of a maid of honor. So the wedding was taking place in the town of Osijek, and we arrived at a little bit earlier, and she prepared for the wedding meticulously. The grooming, the outfit, the hairstyle, the makeup, everything had to be arranged very impeccably for such a solemnity. And on the day of the wedding, there we came earlier in front of the church, and many familiar faces were there. Many relatives, friends, family members, even my sister was there. I recognized her in the crowd. And so they were all socializing, laughing, and at one point we all entered the church. And the wedding started. We sat down in our seats, and you know how it goes. The priest showed up and started the wedding ceremony. And they were there standing by the groom and the bride, as it usually goes. The groom and the bride walked in with that characteristical, music background. We all stood up to greet them, to acknowledge their presence. It was very solemn and very sumptuously organized. And so there they were, getting married, and I was sitting in my seat and thinking my philosophical thoughts as a priest was pronouncing his brief lecture before the wedding ceremony, reading from the Bible. And I thought to myself, as I often address the Lord, because the Lord is present in the heart of each and every one of us, as a Chaitya Guru, the guide from within, the Paramatma. And if you present philosophical questions to the Lord, mysteriously enough, the Lord responds. He guides you from within. Try it sometime. I'm sure you did. Well, but it's wonderful. Don't you think it's wonderful how when you pose your questions before the Lord indeed responds and answers your questions, illuminates you from within and from without through the media of a guru and devotees. So now in these circumstances, I started to roam in my mind through various philosophical questions. I studied the history of church. I'm a bit acquainted with it, quite actually. I studied it very meticulously, how it all went down. So I meditated a little bit on the early church history, on medieval history of the church, and compared it in my mind with the contemporary modality of Christianity that we have now. And I was wondering, dear Lord, given the fact that church in Croatia is so prominent and so powerful relative to other religious groups, is it maybe that you are favoring them because this is the true path, that they are the most close to salvation and liberation and attaining, actually? Are they on the best path to attain the kingdom of God? And is that the reason you favor them so much with such a great opulence in this material world, that they are given so much prominence in society and in this on material plane? What would be the reason that you decided to endow upon them such an outstanding amount of material strength, prominence, making them to stand apart from all other religious groups, at least in this country in particular? Give me some sign, comment please, guide me from within. What would be the reason? Are they so close to you, unlike other religious processes, that they enjoy such material benefits and that they are so prominent and outstanding materially wise? And interestingly enough, the Lord did respond. He made an illuminating arrangement that made me think even more about what it means to be close to the Lord, what it means to be close to salvation from the material entanglement, what it means to be close or closer than others to being qualified, eligible for attaining the kingdom of God. What does it mean? And what are the symptoms of that predispositions? What are the symptoms of being on the right path to that direction, to that objective? So the wedding continued, and there they were. Do you accept him in good or bad, and this and that, for a lawfully wedded wife? I do. And do you accept him for a husband? Yes, I do. So they I do each other, and there they were, a freshly married couple, and everyone was happy. And now the guests were standing up and forming a queue to congratulate the freshly married couple. And all of a sudden I realized my wife is missing. She isn't there. Well, I thought, let's not make a big deal out of it. She probably left somewhere, perhaps to the toilet, or maybe I just don't have her in my visual right now. I'm sure she's somewhere here. So let's just hang out with the people. And now they were all congratulating, they were standing in a queue to congratulate the couple. And as the queue was depleting, becoming shorter, the photo session was coming close. And now all of them were being photographed with the couple. And now I'm starting to seriously wonder where my wife is, because I don't see her, and it's time to be photographed with her cousin and her husband. So I walk a little bit around and I come in front of the entrance of the church outside where the Christians are doing what Christians do in front of the church, giggling, smoking cigarettes and talking about recent developments in society. How will the recent social unrests in Israel affect the stock market or crypto market, or how is the weather going to be and what food will be served in the dining hall, things of that nature. And I asked them, have you seen my wife? We are supposed to be photographed. And I'm holding my son for a hand. I don't want to lose him as well. So we're going back to the church, and now the guests are rotating one after another, being photographed with the couple. And now I'm seriously starting to wonder, where is she? Because after all, she is the maid of honor. And while all of them are being photographed, I'm having a gone girl scenario in the middle of a wedding. So now I'm starting actively to search for her. Where is she? Has something happened? I mean, she wouldn't miss this for a world. She was preparing so much, grooming and everything, and now we are supposed to be photographed with the freshly wedded couple, and she's missing. She has gone missing. And now I'm asking people, where is she? And people are asking me, where is she? Nobody knows. She disappeared. And what can I do? So I go to be photographed with my son without her, and we, and the bride is showing that facial expression, where the heck is she? We're supposed to be photographed all together. And I'm like, yes, I know. I don't know. She has gone missing. Has something happened? Some incident? No. So where is she? Nobody knows. She just vanished. That's all there is. So there we just took a photo without her. What else there was to be done? So after that, I'm going out, and people are leaving the church, going into their cars and leaving for the dining hall, where they will continue to have their celebration, sing and dance into the early morning hours, as they do on the weddings. And now the church is becoming less and less crowded as people are leaving. So I asked my sister, no, seriously, kidding aside, where is she? She disappeared. And we are going now back into the church, and now the church is completely empty. There's only a Jesus Christ. empty as it gets, as empty as it could be. So we're forming a little group, we are supposed to go into the car. I'm thinking maybe I should search for her. I'm trying to be rational about it. Well, maybe some incident happened. I'm trying to come up with at least some rational scenario that could have caused this. What could have caused this? Maybe she got offended. Women sometimes when they get offended, they react very reactively, and maybe she ran away to the parking lot and sat in a car. But I'm holding a key of the car is with me. Maybe she's sitting somewhere near the car, crying, being offended. So I figure, let me go search for her and try to see if I can shake her off from her story and convince her back to come to the church. But no, she's not like that. She doesn't get, she's not dramatic. But anyway, I take a look at the parking lot, around the car, around the church. Nope, she isn't there. She's missing indeed. So now everybody left. Even the bride and the groom left, all the guests left. I'm here alone with my kid, my sister, and her mother, and now we're and two more friends. And we don't want to leave without her. So we're thinking, what should we do? And one lady that I don't really know proposes, let's go in the church and start roaming through the church, knocking on the doors, asking nuns and monks living there. Maybe she's lost somewhere. So we were just about to start, and then I realized, the best man is missing as well. And the priest is missing. And then I'm starting to connect the dots, and just when we were about to embark on our roaming through the church looking for her, they all show up. And I was upset, and I can see something was wrong, and we just hurry into the car to catch with the rest of the guests. And naturally in a car I asked her, what the heck was going on? Where were you? We were so worried about you. We thought you left. And then she starts telling me a story that actually answered my question to the Lord. How close this priest is to the liberation. What happened is that the priest, after the wedding, invited the best man and the maid of honor to his chambers. Well, first of all, to get paid for the service he did, because paid they want to be, and then he wanted to associate with them to figure out what is it that they're doing. So he invites them, and she tells me it was like in the middle of a movie. It was surreal. In the middle of that holy place, in the middle of a church, they have a special room. And in the room, there's a bar. A bar. And first he offers them a drink, like, would you like a vodka, a whiskey? They have a dry gin. No, first he offers them a cigarette because the priest smokes. And the best man smokes as well, since my wife doesn't, she refuses, but the two of them start to smoke. And that little room is full of smoke because they're smoking like anything. So there are a lot of drinks you can choose. There's even a dry gin that is called, to make the things worse, a beef eater. So imagine a priest offering you, would you like some beef eater? And no, I'm afraid not. So they're drinking something strong, smoking, and he's asking them, what is it that they're doing? So the best man gets to reply first, and he asks, we have a little company for electrical services, for wiring. I have 3 or 4 employees, and we do such repairs in Osijek. And the priest replies, so that's very good. My bulb went off here, I have a problem with the socket there, and there are a few more difficulties that you might help me fix in the church. And the best man goes like, no problem, we'll fix that for you. And you lady, what is it that you and your husband do? Our company doesn't service Osijek, we just do some other cities. We haven't stretched out to Osijek quite yet. It's just not in the picture, I'm sorry. And he's like, I can't use you then, I guess. And so they go on talking about completely secular topics, like he was recently 2 years ago to a war in Afghanistan, the priest. So he wanted to take a break from the war, and now he's doing service as a priest. And then he's pouring more liquor to the best man and to himself in those small glasses that they drink it from, which are apparently too small for them. And it was becoming like a bar atmosphere where they drink, smoke, getting drunk, and talk about many other worldly topics that have nothing to do with the Jesus or liberation whatsoever. And then they leave, and we go to the dining hall where the Christians, gather together to celebrate this holy sacred act of getting married, which is also a religious thing. And mostly they dine on meat and flesh of the pieces of animals that they serve on the platters for them. And then I think about the Lord's commandment, thou shalt not kill. And I wonder, how did they succeed to administer all this meat without violating this commandment? Well, obviously they haven't. Obviously they did violate it. So I wonder, I keep on being philosophical while all others are dancing and singing. I keep wondering, what Jesus actually said, that those who are first in this world are not necessarily first, they're last one, sitting in the last row before the Lord. And the other way around, the one who is last in this world will be sitting first to the Lord. And I wonder, how is it possible that such degrading scenario can happen? How can such a sinful behavior take place? How it is? What happened in a history that such sinful patterns have succeeded to penetrate into the patterns of their behavior, even into the patterns of their religious ceremonies, such as drinking wine, which is indeed sinful activity. And I realized throughout the years of my studying of their history and theology, that I even became a professor of, there are 4 categories of ignorance in the contemporary Christianity that we need to be aware of. And we need to be aware of those 4 categories of ignorances, because we don't want those ignorances to creep into our own theology and into our own spiritual lives. Now, there are 4 ignorances in the contemporary Christianity. 2 of them are complete ignorances, and 2 of them are partial ignorances. So we have 2 complete ignorances and 2 categories of partial ignorances. The first ignorance that is prominent in contemporary Christianity is complete ignorance of God. Complete ignorance of what God is. Now, how do I know that? How can we know that they are not in a partial ignorance, but complete ignorance of God? Well, first of all, as we all know, they identify the Lord Jesus Christ with the God himself. They think of him to be the God. Even Jesus clearly states throughout the New Testament in so many places that he isn't, that he's completely dependent on God and inferior to him. Let's just go through a few interesting references that are quite entertaining to hear. In Matthew 24:36, Jesus says, "No one knows about the day or hour, not even the Son, but the Father only." Here Jesus makes a distinction between what he knows and what the Father knows. In Matthew 26:39, he says also, "My Father, if it is possible, may this cup be taken from me, yet not as I will, but as you will." Here Jesus' will is likewise autonomous from God's will. Jesus is seeking acquiescence to God's will, his admission. In John 5:26, Jesus says, "For as the Father has life in himself, so he has granted the Son to have life in himself." Actually, this is not the Jesus statement, it's the statement about Jesus. Jesus received his life from God, and God received his life from no one. He is eternally self-existent. Also in John 5:30, it is said, "By myself I can do nothing." Can you imagine? Jesus says, "By myself I can do nothing. I judge only as I hear, and my judgment is just, for I seek not to please myself, but him who has sent me." Here Jesus says, "By myself I can do nothing." This indicates that Jesus is relying upon his own relationship with God. He's not trying to please myself, but rather he's seeking to please the one who has sent me. In John 5:19, he says, "The Son can do nothing by himself. He can do only what he sees the Father doing, because whatever the Father does, the Son does also." Here Jesus declares that he's following a pattern laid down by God. He's expressing obedience to God. In Mark 10:18, it is said, "Why do you call me good? No one is good except God alone." Here Jesus even emphatically makes a distinction between himself and God as only God being good. In John 14:28, he says, "The Father is greater than I." This is another strong statement that makes a distinction between Jesus and God. In Matthew 6:9, it is said, "Our Father, which art in heaven." He didn't pray, "Our Father, which art standing right here." And in Matthew 27:46, it is said, my God, why have you forsaken me?" Which is inconceivable if he is God himself. And lastly, John 7:21-23 says that all of them may be one, Father, just as you are in me and I am in you. They like to quote that reference from the Bible where Jesus says, "Me and the Father are one." But here Jesus also clarifies what that one means and pertains to. He says, may they also be in us, so that the world may believe that you have sent me, that they may be one as we are one. So he's talking about unity with God. And the list goes on, but I ain't going to go through all the stuff. So, if the Jesus is referring to God as the Father who has sent him, what do they know about God? Well, actually they're in complete ignorance of God. They don't know anything about him because they haven't read the authoritative scriptures from the Vedas that describe the identity of God. Like, for instance, one of the most beautiful descriptions that I'm fond of is the one that we found in Chaitanya Charitamrita, Madhya 23, 70 to 74. Just look, just listen how beautiful, how sublime and simple and direct this description of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is. It is said, Krishna, the Supreme Hero, has the most beautiful transcendental body. This body possesses all good features. It is radiant and very pleasing to the eyes. His body is powerful, strong, and youthful. Krishna is the linguist of all wonderful languages. He is the truthful and very pleasing speaker. He is expert in speaking. And he is a very wise, a learned scholar and a genius. Krishna is very expert in artistic enjoyment. He is highly cunning, expert, grateful, and firmly determined in his vows. He knows how to deal according to time, person, and country, and he sees through the scriptures and authoritative books. He is very clean and self-controlled. Lord Krishna, Bhagavan Shri Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is steady. His senses are controlled, and he is forgiving, grave, and calm. He is also equal to all. Moreover, he is magnanimous, religious, chivalrous, and kind. He is always respectful to respectful people. Krishna is very simple and liberal. He is humble and bashful, and he is the protector of the surrendered souls. He is very happy, and he is always the well-wisher of his devotees. He is all auspicious, and he is submissive to love. I could go on reading like this about Krishna for hours. It's almost intoxicating. It's so beautiful to hear about Krishna's direct description. It makes one ecstatic. But let's proceed with the thread. So what's the second complete category of ignorance? Second category of complete ignorance is the ignorance of the self. Now, the segment of knowledge that is also missing in the contemporary Christianity is the knowledge of the self. Who are we? What is the soul? I was studying at the Christian theology faculty, and they taught that the soul means the body. Alas, what an ignorance to think, to equate the soul with the body. That's coming from Aristotle, actually. The Christian theology is not based, unfortunately, on the teachings of the Jesus alone. They were imbibing from the Thomas Aquinas, from the Aristotle, from the Plato, from many different philosophers, because they don't know that they cannot do that. The parampara system, the system of disciplic succession, means you simply repeat what your spiritual master has taught you. You don't add, you do not adulterate, you don't remove, extract from it, you simply repeat what's given. And you most certainly do not add anything from Aristotle, who taught that soul is the body. That's a big no-no. So they don't know anything about the self, about what the soul is, how is it different from the body, and how does it, as a Brahman, relate to Parabrahman, the Supreme Spirit, the God Himself. The third category of ignorance is partial ignorance, and that is ignorance of what all is sinful. They know thou shalt not kill, even though they are not aware what all it pertains to, what all it applies to. They know they should not lie, there are 10 commandments and other do's and don'ts. But what they don't know is that there are many other things that are sinful. And they're described in Vedic literature. They have no clue that eating grains on Ekadashi or beans on Ekadashi transmits sinful reactions to them to relieve the inhabitants of the lower planetary systems who are suffering in hellish conditions. There is no such information there, but we do have it. There is no knowledge that drinking wine is very sinful, drinking alcohol, intoxication, smoking cigarettes, eating meat. Interestingly enough, the English translation of the New Testaments contains statements that Jesus asked for the meat. But when you trace it back to the more original texts, such as Greek Bible, or you go even more back, nowhere do you find words that have anything to do with meat or flesh. So it's completely whimsically translated. When Jesus says, please give me meat, when you read the Greek original, which is also not original, but it's more original than the English one, it says, is there anything to eat? And so on and so on. So this knowledge of what all is sinful and what is it all that we have to stay away from is lacking. And eventually the fourth category of ignorance is the ignorance of the difference between the heavenly planets and the spiritual world, which is actually a part of the bigger picture of a problem that they don't delineate between the piety and spirituality. In Vedas we know that being pious is not good enough. Doing nice, proper deeds that create good karma may be nice for some, but Vaishnavas are interested in pure spirituality. That means the self-realization of us as eternal servant of the Lord, who cares for nothing but the Lord and wants to develop pure love for God and simply please His transcendental senses, not one's own. Prabhupada gives an example. While he was walking in a morning walk, he asked his disciples holding a flower in his hand, is this flower material that I'm holding right now, or is it spiritual? So disciples were coming up with different variety of answers, trying to figure out what is Prabhupada implying. And Prabhupada gave a lucid and very simple explanation. If I use this flower for my own sense gratification, that's what makes it material. But if I simply think of this flower, how beautiful flower that I can offer to Krishna, to please his transcendental senses, to please him, to bring this flower forward for his satisfaction, then that makes this flower entirely and solely spiritual. So this is the segment of the knowledge that is also lacking. So we have to be aware of that too. And the list of the categories of the ignorance goes on and on. Ignorance of the original message of their teacher. What is it that Jesus was actually preaching? There are so many scriptures that haven't made it to the Bible, but that are still there, accessible for reading, containing the original texts and information and instruction of him. And ignorance of its own history, not having the continuous disciplic succession. So coming back from such a wedding, I was thinking how being a priest today can become a job, because society, the market, needs weddings, they need funerals, they need someone who will perform such rituals and get paid for it. So we don't want to be such monks, we don't want to be such priests who do it as a job. We want to be brahmanas. You see, in Hindu tradition, such proclivity is also there in the history. To be a priest as a job. In my last lecture, we were going there more deeply. I don't want to go back to those topics now again. smarter brahmanas, right? We were talking about the duels that Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati had in India with them on public programs. How they were trying to preserve their monopoly over being a priest in a Hindu society of Bengal and wider in India, as being a brahmana is something inheritary, that you inherit, and only you are privileged to be a priest and to give initiations and perform such activities and be paid for it. However, brahmana does not pertain to that. Brahmana, as we learned from the previous episode, means being the one who knows Brahman, who is aware of the spiritual reality and is sheltered in that spiritual reality. So we want to be such monks, we want to be such brahmanas who are properly spiritually situated and not make a job out of it. Because Prabhupada says, I hate to quote that, but Prabhupada says that if you get paid for the service you perform unto your spiritual master, then that payment indeed is the only payment you're going to get. Heavy. So be careful and make sure not to get paid in this world for the service you perform for your spiritual master and for Krishna and Prabhupada, because your payment awaits you in Vrindavan, where the cowherd boys are waiting for you to play, or whatever your spiritual original form is. I don't want to go that esoteric now, but you get the point, right? We want to get paid at Krishna's lotus feet by being granted his association and service unto him under the guidance of qualified devotees such as Srimati Radharani and other inhabitants of the spiritual sky. We refuse to get paid below that quotation. So very interesting point, a very interesting sentence that's coming from Prabhupada. One who gets paid for the service he performs unto his spiritual master, that payment is all the payment he's going to get. Something to think about and be careful about. So that's the point of being spiritually situated, and being situated as a monk, as a priest, as a matter of a job we do, pleasing the needs of the market for funerals, rituals, ceremonies, and different religious solemnity that they want to gather for. And being a monk, being a priest, in a sense, is a dharma and duty of all the varnas. As a brahmacharis, we learn how to behave, how to control our senses, how to be properly spiritually situated. But not because that pertains only to monks. Because whether a person throughout his life remains a monk or he moves on and becomes a householder, it's something he needs to carry with him. This hygiene of daily spiritual living, controlling the senses. Because being the monk without being spiritually situated makes us a priest like that, who ends up drinking liquor, eating meat, smoking, intoxicating, and performing a variety of other sinful activities. We want to be a spiritually situated monks. We want to be monks who are situated in Brahman, Brahma Achar, one who behaves on the level of Brahman. And on the other hand, being spiritually situated without being trained up very nicely in controlling one's senses, in having the knowledge what all is sinful and what is not, how to behave, to make oneself spiritually to make oneself pre-qualified, predispositioned for spiritual advancing. Without that, how will one spiritually advance? So Prabhupada writes, actually Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita that, "O Arjuna, do know that restraining oneself from sense gratification is the same thing as yoga. Renouncing the sense gratification is the same as yoga, because no one can become a yogi. No one can become a transcendentalist without giving up this sense gratification or regulating it in accordance in accordance with one's own dharma and one's own ashram. This knowledge must be there, and implementation of that knowledge must be there. Otherwise, one will not last in this process of Krishna consciousness. You see, this is the greatest boon. One may wonder, whose refuge do I take? It's described in his book, Teachings of Sri Chaitanya. Prabhupada writes, returning from Benares, from the meeting with Mayavadi sannyasis led by Prakashananda Saraswati, Lord Chaitanya was going and simply singing and dancing, and thousands of people followed him. Some of them were laughing, some of them were dancing, some of them were singing, and some of them were out of the ecstasy, falling down on the ground, prostrated, offering obeisances unto the Lord. This movement is the Sankirtan movement of Lord Chaitanya. And we want to be part of that movement. There's a beautiful prayer of Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami says, I offer my respectful obeisances unto Sri Krishna Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda, who are like the sun and the moon. They have arisen simultaneously on the horizon of Gauda to dissipate the darkness of ignorance and thus wonderfully bestow benediction upon all. In regards to this, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur writes, there is no vow like chanting the holy name, no knowledge superior to it, no meditation which comes anywhere near it, and it gives the highest result. No penance is equal to it, and nothing is as potent or powerful as the holy name of Krishna. Chanting is the greatest act of piety and the supreme refuge. Even the words of the Vedas do not possess sufficient power to describe its magnitude. Chanting is the highest path to liberation, peace, and eternal life. It is the pinnacle of devotion, the heart's joyous proclivity and attraction, and the best form of remembrance of the Supreme Lord. The holy name has appeared solely for the benefit of the living entities as their Lord and Master, their supreme worshipful object, and their spiritual guide and mentor. Whoever continuously chants Lord Krishna's holy name, even in his sleep, can easily realize that the name is a direct manifestation of Krishna himself, in spite of the influences of Kali Yuga. So this is what we are monks for. This is what we are restricting our senses for. We are closing gates to sense gratification and materialistic life, to open the gates for the holy name of Krishna, for opening our transcendental and for awakening our transcendental senses, purifying them, pre-qualifying them, and opening them for perceiving this dimension of spiritual reality. Because being a devotee of the Lord Krishna is not just being a believer, it means being a perceiver, a receiver of his mercy and perceiver of that reality of spiritual bliss. Devotees of Lord Krishna do not just believe, they don't just spend their lives believing what they're practicing is true, waiting for death to show it whether they were right or wrong. They perceive that reality throughout their spiritual lives. They perceive the Krishna's name, Krishna's qualities, Krishna's form, Krishna's pastimes, the blissful nature of the transcendental abode of Krishna. They perceive it while chanting the holy name. They perceive it when they're visiting the holy places. They perceive it when they're associating with other devotees. Because spiritual life is abundant with these experiences, provided we are qualified and purified enough. So we are fortunate to be in the temple. We are fortunate to be monks and be trained like monks, because it teaches us how to control our senses, how to live in cleanliness that is next to godliness. That is, we're living in an atmosphere that is going to make us pre-qualified for opening our senses for these dimensions of reality. That is very fortunate. And it is giving us the habit of how to live even later in life, when and if we move on to be a householder. Because it's not that these rules and regulations, these prerequisites do not apply to householders. Indeed, they do. So how will you make it as a householder if you cannot make it as a monk in the ashram? You know, you're supposed to capture this habit of living and carry it with it throughout all the phases of your life, all the way to vanaprastha and sannyas, all the way to the point of quitting one's body, chanting Krishna's name and remembering his pastimes. This is the essence of the spiritual life. And as Prabhupada explains, this spiritual realization really is a realization that we are servants of the Lord, servants of the Krishna's transcendental senses, and realizing how we can find infinite satisfaction in such a service, as opposed to the identity and consciousness of enjoyer and controller of the material nature. So that's why sense gratification and enjoying this material world does not go hand in hand with realizing that we are servants of the Lord. So we have to decide who will we side with. Are we siding with material nature, with the ego and consciousness of the enjoyer of the material world, or we are siding with our true identity and our true eternal role of the servant of the Lord, to which rebelliousness brought us to this material world in the first place. So this decision has to be there, and it has to be profound. It has to go to the depths, deepest depths of our personality, of our heart, of our consciousness. It has to burst into the deepest chambers of our senses as a light, as a knowledge. Yes, I'm the servant of the Lord. I want to purify my ego. I want to purify my subtle body. I want to purify my senses with the knowledge, light, and joy of the fact that I am the servant of the Lord, and this is my true nature. And this, being a monk, is a wonderful opportunity to be trained up in this practice. Because believing is not enough. We have to feel it, we have to live it, and we have to put it in action. And it is then that Krishna responds. As he says, Mam chayovya bicharena bhakti yogena sevate sagunan samatityaitan brahmabhuya kalpate. When one engages in my service 24/7, when one is fully absorbed in the service of mine, I immediately suspend the influences of the lower modes, of all the modes, of the gunas of material nature, and one becomes situated on Brahma on the platform of Brahman. Even though you're not that advanced, you're not on the level of Brahman. But simply because you are absorbed in the service for Prabhupada, for Lord Chaitanya, for Nityananda, for Krishna, in the Sankirtan movement, in hearing and chanting, one is immediately saved from the sinful life. One is being as if he or she is situated on the level of Brahman. He may be a neophyte, but just because he's so well absorbed under the guidance of senior devotees, because he's so well absorbed in the devotional service, into the incessant flow of the devotional service, he is immediately rescued from the influence of the modes, and he feels joy and satisfaction emanating from the bhakti yoga practice. So you can experience it practically. We have seen it so many times, over and over again, in different cities, in different continents, that young boys and girls are joining this Krishna consciousness movement and so quickly developing so many good qualities. So I wish you all luck in your efforts and many beautiful and spiritually enlivening spiritual experiences throughout this practical implementation of devotional service in your Be a Monk session. Godspeed, and thank you very much for your attention. Now, Hare Krishna, if there is something that someone wants to add or ask or comment, fire away.
Thank you very much for the lecture, especially the conclusion. It was very powerful. I wanted to actually just to understand that it was not about this lecture was not about addressing some specific religion, but just giving an example of one, maybe more known religion, in what understanding God means and what understanding God doesn't mean. Is this the point of the lecture?
Well, I was serendipitously going through different topics, but I was trying to connect them all into one whole. Perhaps I succeeded or not. I was just, my lecture is never completely shaped by someone's order, how or what he would like me to deliver. It's hard to control, actually, what you will end up speaking. Sometimes you can prepare yourself basic highlights that you want to cover, but some details happen spontaneously.
This section was not about speaking against Christianity.
Well, it depends on how you define Christianity. Christianity originally means following Jesus. And being a Christian means to be a disciple of Jesus, right? So if someone is not disciplined by the instructions of the Jesus, if someone is even ignorant of what his teachings are about, then how can he be disciplined by his teachings? And if he cannot, then how can he be a Christian? So yes, most certainly this is not against Christianity, because Christianity is one form of Vaishnavism, one legit modality of God consciousness. What is it against is about deviations from that original teachings. Thinking that you are following someone who you have nothing with, are you even aware of how did he live, what his spiritual practice on a daily basis were? What his closest disciples under his instructions were practicing? Do you know anything about that? Do you know about the fact that he was a vegetarian? Do you know about the fact that he was having a strict, rigid sadhana, meaning spiritual practice on a daily basis, that he was teaching his disciples, apostles, to practice that? Are you aware of that? Then are you aware of the philosophy and theology that he was talking about different planets? It's described in different scriptures that didn't make it into the Bible. He was teaching about so many advanced spiritual topics that contemporary Christians have no knowledge of. So it's obviously not against Christianity, it's against ignorance of Christianity. We have to dispel the ignorance and replace it with knowledge. Because out of this ignorance, sinful reactions ensue. And out of this ignorance, this approach to monk life, to priesthood life ensues. That I can take up to the being a priest or being a monk in a monastery as some professional activity that I will be paid for. And once I'm done with my job, I will return back to my secular activities. That's not how monk life works, neither how it should look like. So I was trying to cast some light on these topics and delineate between authentic priesthood and authentic spiritual life, as opposed to attempts to feel identified and affiliated with some spiritual authority in a way that that particular authority would not vouch for. You see, this is very important. You have to ask yourself, I'm following this spiritual authority in some way, but would he vouch for the way I'm following him? Would he consent? Would he agree with the way how I'm following him? The way they are following him has nothing to do with how early first century Christians were living their Christianity. It's like completely two different things, two different religions. They concocted and made up completely new religion for themselves, based on different philosophers, based on church gatherings. Throughout as of 4th century forward, they started intensely with these councils coming up with new beliefs, composing a new identity of the entire theology. That didn't have nothing to do with Jesus. It's not like Jesus ever said, I'm preaching this to you, what it is that I'm preaching, but once I'm gone, few hundred years from now, contemporary Christians will gather and they will have their councils, and then they will decide what should be believed, and they will supplement me, a big deal. So wait for those councils, because I'm not capable of telling you everything I need to tell you. That's not what he said. So we have to learn to delineate between this, between the original message and between something that came later. That's very important, because Prabhupada was very, very, very particular about it. He was very adamant about not changing anything. That's how disciplic succession works. So being a monk, being a good devotee also has to do a lot about not changing anything from Prabhupada's books, from Prabhupada's philosophy, and even from Prabhupada's mood. To be a strict follower of Prabhupada means to first understand him completely and profoundly. Because how can you follow something that you don't understand and know profoundly and completely? That's the first prerequisite of becoming someone's follower. So that's the sad situation with contemporary Christians. They have such a incomplete, minute knowledge of the original mood and original message of Jesus, that it's very, very difficult to even think in terms of them following him. I hope that clarifies. Anything else? No? Okay. So thank you very much for attention. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai.